In a short time, a virus that is unseen by the naked eye has transformed Western democracies, socialist regimes, and dictatorships across the world. Here in the United States, governors have shut down businesses and called for stay-at-home orders. Donald Trump and the Congress have dedicated trillions of dollars to keep the economy running. What's sad and somewhat scary is that personal privacy is about to be set aside in an effort to try and identify who has the COVID-19 virus via personal app or on a smartphone. Congress has passed the package that is worth $21 trillion, which is 10% of our GDP. To give you perspective, this is twice the amount that was passed in 2007 and 2009. Across the pond, where our allies reside, central banks are printing money and using it to buy assets that they once spurned. As it stands, governments are trying to ban bankruptcy. This is a new reality for components of limited government and open markets. COVID-19 has changed all of the rules. The government must act decisively. And this could pose a problem, because as we all know, not all governments to be trusted. This fragile state that people and businesses are facing could be used as a way to restrict their personal freedoms. As in the past, the government grows during a crisis. That's one reason why they have been formed. They alone can coerce and mobilize vast resources very quickly. As of today, they are needed to enforce business closures and isolation to stop the virus. Only they can offset the resulting economic collapse. One reason the government's role has even changed so rapidly is that COVID-19 spreads like wildfire. In less than 4 months, it has gone from a market in Wuhan to almost every country in the world. Fear is the reason for rapid change. When the U.S. government tried to hang back so as to minimize government interference, it was accused of doing too little, too late. In France, they passed a law giving the government the power to control people's movements and manage prices and goods. In most other countries around the world, their governments have responded to COVID-19 with a mix of coercion and economic heft. As this pandemic proceeds, it is likely to exploit its unique power to monitor people using their data. In Hong Kong, apps and phones are used to show where you are in order to enforce quarantines. That's dangerous. Phone data help to predict the spread of the disease. If governments are successful in quashing COVID-19, as China has, it will need to prevent a second wave among the many who are still susceptible by attacking every cluster case. South Korea reports that automatically tracing the contacts of fresh infections using mobile technology gets results in 10 minutes instead of 24 hours. This increase in state power has taken place with almost no time for debate. People will reassure themselves that it's just a temporary time and that will leave almost no mark. But the scale of the response makes COVID-19 more like a war. Here, history suggests that crises lead to a permanently bigger state with many more powers and responsibilities, and the taxes to pay for them. Looking ahead, some changes may be less clear-cut, but will be hard to undo because they were backed by powerful constituencies even before the pandemic. One example is the further unpicking of the Eurozone, go back to Europe, pact that is supposed to impose discipline on the member states' borrowing. Likewise, Britain has taken its railways under state control, a step that is supposed to be temporary, but which may never be retracted. More worrying is the spread of bad habits. Governments may retreat into autocracy. Some fear running out of the ingredients for medicines, many of which are made in China. Russia has imposed a temporary ban on exporting grain. Industrialists and politicians have lost trust in supply chains. It is but a small step from there to a long-term state supports for the national champions that will have just been bailed out by taxpayers. Trade's already dim. All this would further cloud them and the recovery. And in the long term, a vast and lasting expansion of the state, together with dramatic higher public debt, is likely to lead to a lumbering, less dynamic kind of capitalism. But that is not the biggest problem. The greater worries lie elsewhere, in the abuse of office and the threats to freedom. Some politicians are already making power grabs, as in Hungary, where the government is seeking an indefinite state of emergency. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to see the crisis as a chance to evade for a trial for corruption. The most worrying is the dissemination of intrusive surveillance. Invasive data collection and processing will spread because it offers a real edge in managing the disease. But they also require the state to have routine access to citizens' medical and electronic records. The temptation will be to use surveillance after the pandemic, much as anti-terror legislation was extended after 9/11. This might start with tracing TB cases or drug dealers. Nobody knows where it will end, especially if, having dealt with COVID-19 surveillance, Mad China is seen as a model. Surveillance may well be needed to cope with COVID-19. Rules with sunset clauses and scrutiny built in can help stop that at the time. But the main defense against the overmighty state in tech and the economy will be citizens like you and me. They must remember that a pandemic government is not fit for everyday life.